Latino is an umbrella term that represents many different cultures and ethnicities. These people can all trace their heritage back to Spanish-speaking countries of Latin America, and they are the largest ethnic group in the U.S. Most people classify themselves differently, such as Americans of Mexican heritage or, say, Cuban origins. Also, neither the term Latino or Hispanic refers to race. We'll talk about the key issues of immigration and other aspects that these groups face in the next few slides. 6. The largest number of the Latino population traces their roots to Mexico, though about 1/3 of the population are from other countries and regions. Many of the smaller groups concentrate their populations in certain areas. For example, most Latinos from Puerto Rico live in New York City, and most of those from Cuba live in Florida. A strong concern in our country is unauthorized immigrants. The official number of immigrants is about 53 million, and these are 2017 figures. But it's difficult to know exactly how many undocumented people are in the U.S., specifically because there's no way to track them accurately. Some states welcome undocumented workers and make it easier for them to access services, while others do not. Official policy varies depending not only on what each state has for policies, but also across time. President Obama saw the need for immigrant labor and the humanitarian issues that immigration posed, and Obama tended to have much more lenient and welcoming policies for immigrants. He was much more tolerant of undocumented workers as well. President Trump, on the other hand, has made the removal of undocumented immigrants a national priority since his election in 2016. As I mentioned earlier, the Latino population is dispersed across the country, though there tends to be certain areas where the population is much denser than others. The majority of Latinos live in either California, Texas, or Florida. These locations are geographically close to many of their roots in Mexico or Cuba. On average, Latinos have the lowest incomes of any racial or ethnic group in the U.S. Economics is usually correlated with overall well-being for a group, so lower incomes generally mean lower levels of well-being. However, another way to measure economic well-being is to consider the lower poverty levels of certain groups. If we look at it this way, we see a larger number of African Americans who live in the more extreme poverty range than Latinos. At the same time, African Americans are slightly more likely to make more than $100,000 a year than Latinos are. Compared to their representation in the general population, Latinos are underrepresented as elected officials and in politics. According to their percentage of the population, there should be 16 to 17 of the 100 U.S. senators who are Latino, but in reality there are only 2. And Latinos have only 7% of the seats in the House of Representatives. As compared to whites, educational achievement is much lower for Latinos. While less than 8% of the white population does not complete high school, almost 35% of Latinos do not. About 1/3 of all whites complete college, while less than half of that amount of Latinos receive a college degree. Educational attainment is lowest for Latinos as well when you consider this group compared to other minority groups, with a much larger proportion of Latinos not completing high school as compared to other racial and ethnic groups. College graduation rates for this group is lower as well. African Americans have been marginalized in this country not only due to the legacy of slavery, but also due to the institutional discrimination in housing and employment. The concept of Jim Crow laws refers to the practice in the South of developing laws that would limit the contact of whites and blacks and make it difficult for blacks to exercise their rights. While slavery was outlawed after the Civil War, there were many institutional barriers towards equality, such as segregation in eating establishments, as depicted in the photo of the sit-in at the Woolworth's counter. It took almost a full century after the Civil War for this country to pass the Civil Rights Act, to make it illegal to discriminate on the basis of race. During the 1960s, and moving forward in time, many African Americans were hopeful and had rising expectations, hoping the laws would usher in a better way of life. But for many, there was little change. While there have been some gains in the past 50 years, equality on many fronts has yet to be achieved. There are now some sociologists that believe there is a class split and division in the African American population, that some have gone on to become educated and affluent to some degree, while others have been left behind with a lack of education and remain poor.